All right. Hello and welcome to the TEDxYouth at KYUEM Debate Showcase 2022. My name is William and I'll be your chairperson for this round. Allow me to introduce the esteemed adjudicators for this round: Reverend Lim Taijie, Amar Husni bin Muhammad Hiswandi, Serafina Chong Sin Yu, and the timekeeper Mustaqim bin Mubashir from College Yayasan UEM. The motion for today's debate is: this House supports the notion that moral limits and standards for society is the new age colonialism. The government side is from Sunway College. The Prime Minister is Kavishnu Nadaraja. Deputy Prime Minister is Vigneshwaran Sundrasagar. And the government whip is Mior Arif bin Mior Muhammad Farid. Whereas the opposition in this debate is from College Yayasan UEM. The Prime Minister is Olivia Tojihui. The Deputy Prime Minister is Teo Chen Wen, and the opposition whip is Jenny Hui Jieyue. Right, before we begin, here is a brief reminder of the rules. Each speech is 7 minutes long. The bell will be rung once at the first minute, indicating the start of points of information or POI, and at the 6th minute for the end of POIs. No POIs can be presented outside of this window. The bell will be rung twice at the 7th minute, indicating the end of the speech. The reply speech should be 4 minutes long. No POIs may be offered during the reply speech. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Government Prime Minister, Kavishnu, to open the floor, the debate.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be beginning in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, moral limits are inherently and in and of itself elitist. Now, I'm going to begin my speech by giving you the definition of what exactly we mean by neo-colonialism and colonialism in general. So neo-colonialism in the context of this debate, right? It means cultural colonialism, because we're talking about the moral values and standards. So it means imposing what you believe about a certain thing onto a different country. So now we believe that this debate should occur within the context of nations that were former colonies, right, where colonial remnants are still very strongly. So examples of this are like how Dutch laws are the foundation of like the laws in Indonesia, how British law, UK law is the foundation for the laws in Malaysia. So these laws were not developed by Malaysian history, by Malaysian people and the culture over here, but rather by what was practiced in the UK by the UK, and it was adapted into over here. So the foundation of it is not original to us, and it is adaptive. So neo-colonialism, right? This looks like Western influence in the social norms of these societies, of these nations that we are in. So this looks like so when we talk about Western values, we're talking about things like how old you have to be when you get married, how old do you have to be when you get your first girlfriend, how old do you have to be when you move out of the house, and what do you eat, how many times do you go pray, how religious do you have to be, and things like that. So what we mean by colonialism, neo-colonialism in this sense, is that it is you are imposing all these values, these traditions that don't necessarily fit with these nations, but they are from a different place, and you are imposing it on a lesser nation. Now, for the sake of this debate, we're going to characterize this as like Western nations imposing these ideals on non-Western nations, because traditionally it has been Western countries, European ones, that have performed colonialism, right? So now the burden on opposition in this debate, before I bring forward points of my own, is to prove that without these with these Western values in place in society, in these nations, right, it benefits the people living over there. And now in my first point, I'm going to prove to you, in the point I'm going to bring up here, I'm going to prove to you why that is not the case. And in fact, how by imposing these Western values, these Western traditions on these nations, you are actually harming them in many ways. All right. So the main point here, the main point here is that by doing this, by this act of neo-colonialism, it lacks intersectionality, and this can be damaging to the nations. So what do I mean by this? Now, this means what I mean by this is that aspects of a nation, all right, may not be compatible with certain values and standards that another nation might have. So, for example, if you're living in a Western nation, which is generally more developed, more liberal and stuff like that, you would be expected to move out of the house at a younger age, at the age of 18, for example. But if you're in an Eastern country, a non-Western country where it is less developed, where opportunities are less, where people are less, everything's all more considered, for you to move out at the age of 18 may not be as feasible as it would be for you to do in a Western country. Imagine someone in a country like Malaysia, for example, moving out at such an early age where job opportunities are not as available, social help is not as prevalent, and you go out and you end up suffering. And this, of course, can be very harmful to the individual. And they are doing all this because they believe that this is what is expected of them. This is the standard that they have to live up to. When in truth, the country's infrastructure and their culture and their history, their tradition doesn't really fit in with this. And so they're just harming themselves. Right? Another example is like collectivism versus like individualistic cultures, where Western nations tend to be more individualistic, right? But Eastern ones, non-Western ones tend to be more collectivistic because of our tradition and history. So imagine in a workplace, if you were in a Western nation, for example, you would be expected to prioritize yourself, to go after that promotion, to seek to improve on yourself, to get that better pay than everyone else. But in an Eastern nation, in a non-Western nation, where collectivism is seen as more important, it would be more important for you to prioritize teamwork over the pursuit of your own personal goals. So this looks like, I mean, in a Western country, for example, this would be someone who's abandoning teamwork, or who's like putting their teammates, not throwing them under the bus necessarily, but just putting the focus on themselves, making them the star of each project. But this would probably not work better in an Eastern nation because of society and culture and the traditions that they uphold over there. So people who try to follow these Western values in a non-Western country, they end up getting a bit stigmatized. They're non-productive. This can be very harmful to people there as well. The second layer of this argument is that local culture and tradition is being suppressed because of how Western values and Western moral traditions, Western standards are being imposed on these non-Western countries. Right. So what this looks like is because of how Western values and these traditions and these standards are seen as correct and should be practiced, the traditions and culture of the people of that nation are being will be damaged. So people start to lose their sense of identity, and their culture starts being suppressed in favor of like Western values. For example, you got some cultures and traditions in Malaysia, for example, where you perform, let's say, some ritual, some religion, political, and because of these Western values, they are not being practiced because the standards that say that it is wrong for you to do something else. Well, this really shouldn't be the case, because then what's happening is that the tradition, the culture, the religion, the identity of these people is being taken away from them, and so they are losing their sense of identity, and we don't think that is a good thing. So on the flip side of this, in our world, why this is better is that, one, if you behave practically according to what is possible, what makes sense to suffer, because that would be the social norm, and there's just more utility coming out of this. And two, your culture doesn't feel diminished by these Western cultures that assert themselves as more important, as universal. Okay, so it doesn't make you demonized, it doesn't make you feel diminished, and people are able to feel proud and things, and people are actually able to feel proud of their culture. Now, since this debate occurs within society, I've got a preemptive rebuttal to give you. Since it occurs within society, it is imposed on you naturally, right? So inherently, just because we are opposed to these Western standards being practiced in non-Western countries, it doesn't mean that we are condoning or promoting things like murder and terrorism and stuff like that. So the thing is, people who would actually commit things like this in our side of the world would also do it on both sides. So we don't think that is an argument that would pass in today's debate. And for all those reasons, I think the government should take this debate. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now, please welcome the Opposition Prime Minister, Olivia, to open the case for their side.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you're audible and visible.
Okay, I may begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon to everyone. As the first speaker of the opposition, I would like to give a general introduction to our motion. This debate is discussing the tools that are utilized by New Age colonialism, specifically on the issue upon moral limits and standards for society. The idea is that countries are heavily influenced by others through political, economical means. By most countries, especially Asian and Middle Eastern countries, uphold moral limits and standards that greatly differs from the larger powers that are trying to influence them. Moving on to our definition of the motion, we define moral limits and standards as social norms such as manners, principles, culture, and beliefs. And our definition of colonialism is control over people or a country, a practice of domination and influence after the Second World War. Specifically, we would like to talk about the definition of neocolonialism. The government team defines neocolonialism as something cultural, and we believe that the government team is squirreling the debate because it's not so solely dependent on cultural factors. Our definition of neocolonialism is that it takes the form of economic imperialism, globalization, and conditional aid to influence or control a developing country. The stakeholders we have identified in this debate is the society in general, as colonialism affects the way of life in certain aspects for these societies, not just in cultural aspects, and also smaller countries and larger state powers. Our stance on this debate is that this debate is a cut and dry debate. Our only role as the opposition side is to disprove whether or not social norms are the main tools for New Age colonialism, or are other aspects and factors the actual tools that lay influence upon a country and its society. There's no need to discuss the benefits or harms of neocolonialism, as we believe it's not relevant to the debate. Thus, our case will loyally focus on whether or not social norms are modern colonizing utilities. Our aim as opposition is to prove that societal standards are not a major form of influence. Rather, educational systems, capitalism, trading, and political pressure are used more heavily in terms of a state influencing another. And we can see it in our very own country, Malaysia. Malaysia has many social norms and standards which originate from cultures and traditions that have majorly remained despite waves of liberalism and modern mentality, but are heavily influenced in terms of educational systems, political structure, and consumption of goods, but do not retain the same social norms as Western countries, including the public acceptance of LGBTQ. Our first argument is that each country's moral limits and standards are not influenced easily and will not be an effective tool for influence or domination or colonialism in this case. Each country has their own moral limits and standards. What is considered a norm in a certain society may not be considered appropriate socially or religiously in another society. The very simple and well-known fact that a country like the United States legalizes same-sex marriage, while a country like Malaysia criminalizes this issue, it very clearly proves to us that so-called social norms differ from place to place and is not able to easily colonize another society. Furthermore, considering that Malaysia was once a colony of Britain and that same-sex marriage is legal throughout Britain, yet after 131 years of colonization, our country still holds on to different mindsets in terms of moral limits on same-sex marriage. And this is sufficient enough to prove that colonization does not affect the foundations of a country's social norms easily. Much of these social norms ultimately are derived from a millennia of traditions and cultures that have long been established within countries. And in many developed or underdeveloped countries, little change has been brought to these norms. Therefore, it's incredibly difficult for another larger state power or another state power to control a country through the means of social influence, meaning it's hard to expect a society or of another state to be heavily influenced through social media, propaganda, or social criticisms from the separate state. This is strongly displayed through how many smaller countries, though influenced through other ways like political structure, economical dependency, still retain their traditional ways. The government team needs to first prove that the ability of social norms to fully dominate and influence modern day society. And if they are able to show that there is some influence, we'd still like to challenge the impact of it. Thus, it's the burden of the government team to prove us the effectiveness of using social standards as a means of neocolonialism, and ultimately the impact of their influence compared to the influence of an actual overwhelming economic dependency of these countries. They must compare the tools and tell us straightforwardly on which method is the best in practice of domination in modern-day society, on a global scale as a state. Therefore, our opposition team believes that social norms do not contribute in the colonialism of a society. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Now I present the Government Deputy Prime Minister, Vigneshwaran, to continue the case for their side.
Am I visible right now? And am I audible at the same time?
Yes, you are. Please proceed.
Oh wait, audio. So give me a second, yeah. Yeah. Am I visible and audible? Let me just double check having some mic issues or something.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Am I visible? Alright, thank you. Cameras. Yeah. Okay. Let me just give me some time to arrange this. Right. So given that the chats don't work the chat doesn't work to like accept POIs, I'll take POIs verbally. So just say POI and I'll like address it. If I don't address it, I'll address it just before the 6 minutes. Right. That being said, beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think that we need to understand in today's debate, as Kavinu phrased it, the very concept of moralism in of itself is elitist. Panel, we also need to understand that in today's debate, we seek to tell you that the entire concept of neocolonialism is something that is inherently wrong in our society. Now, before getting into the case coming out of government as an extension, and no, I'm just to clarify, I'm unmuted, right? Like you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, moving on to that before we get into the case coming out from side government. So first and foremost, let's get into a quick few extraneous reply coming out of opposition's case. Panel, understand first and foremost that this entire lack of charitability in understanding what colonialism is and wishing for side government to narrow down the debate to certain aspects of it is something that is hugely uncharitable coming out of side opposition. Side opposition says, oh, government doesn't take the debate or doesn't talk about neocolonialism because they don't focus on one very niche aspect of neocolonialism. But panel, I think that neocolonialism in of itself is a spectrum. And the fact that we choose to talk about the moral impositions of neocolonialism doesn't necessarily mean that we don't talk about it. So that entire rebuttal coming out of op as to how we're not even talking about the motion is completely sidestepped because the fact that we are talking about neocolonialism, I don't understand why this has been negated. I feel like that entire first minute just doesn't make sense. Moving on, they talk about this entire issue of us not being influenced by standards. So for example, nations like Malaysia, they're not influenced by this entire neocolonialistic standards. Panel, we tell you that if in this debate, we just keep saying, aha, but this example is why neocolonialism doesn't happen. But aha, this example why neocolonialism does happen, the debate just never takes place. It is not a charitable ground, it's not a debatable ground in today's debate. Panel, I think both sides need to accept in today's debate that neocolonialism does understandably happen to some extent. We understand that neocolonialism probably does seep into society to a certain extent on both sides of the house. Neither can necessarily fiat this and say that, oh no, neocolonialism doesn't happen at all. Because even as Kavishnu characterized, the very remnants and the very, as a matter of fact, the very thing that is pointed out by opposition just supports the entire notion of neocolonialism. If we really want to go that specific into things, when she brings up the issue of same-sex marriage, panel understand that factually speaking, same-sex marriage was never legal nor illegal in Malaysia till common law and said, aha, you can't be gay anymore in Malaysia. So I don't understand that entire point coming out because it entirely hinges on that one example with no intuitive analysis as to why it occurs. Moving on to our case, as an extension first as to what my Prime Minister has said. So Prime Minister talks about this entire debate of intersectionality, right? I think it's pretty understandable. I think that this concept of how there is a disconnect between how Western society works and how articulated, no thank you, and how articulated, thank you, and how Eastern society works. I think that this does make sense. This is just him talking about how Western ideals cannot work in an Eastern society because And there is an imposition, as he characterized, from the West towards this. But I'm going to give you a bit here as to what where the maintenance of these Western ideals in Eastern society amongst individuals. I think that, as Kaushal rightly points out, people do not have access as a means to success, because understand that on their side, these people are going to keep going on with these Western ideals, and they're necessarily not going to feel a sense of, they're going to feel like a certain degree of isolation, and they're not going to be able to work. We tell you then that the reason that people as an actor would necessarily buy into this is because of the fact that just because the remnants of tradition, as Kavishnu points out, the reason why that this is the most important aspect of today's debate is because of the fact that understand that these people within this community are people that are trying to come up in society, or even minorities in Western communities, they are trying to come up within these communities, and therefore by allowing them to hold on to Western principles within especially Eastern communities, this is bad because they then do not get access, they do not get benefit, they are detrimental if they accept these entire ideals of moral values that do not necessarily work in certain communities. Therefore, this is very, very important debate, and it's very difficult to contend this problem in which they are nations whereby these Western enriched narrative principles are very dominant narrative, and this leads to issues in which Eastern-centric ideals are demonized within the countries. Panel, understand that if you are a minority in a certain nation like the United States, imagine if you are a Muslim minority, you grow up believing that your entire sense of culture is false. We think that this is principally unjust, which is going to be the main crux of what I push in my speech today, which is it is principally right for people to have a certain level of morality to govern their own sense of self, and this more often than not, yes, it's from their own traditions, but we think that it is better that these people have their own sense of self within them as compared to colonialistic ideals, right? Before I get into that, I'll take the PY real quick. 1, 2, 3, right, no man. So the
previously mentioned that same-sex marriage is not legal or illegal in Malaysia. So what do you say to those people who have same-sex marriage in Malaysia that have been put into jail?
For you to ask, considering that your side pushes this entire thing like, oh, we should reject same-sex marriage. We think that the entire issue of whether or not certain norms are politically correct and are human rights violations or not, I'm not really what the debate is trying to talk about. I mean, of course, I think both sides say that like same-sex marriage in general shouldn't be illegal if that's what they're trying to force us into. But what we're saying is that principally speaking, the ideal of same-sex marriage being something that is uniquely Malaysian and therefore proof that Malaysian culture is like not going to be interfered by just because we consume Western media is something that is intuitively false. Because of the fact that on a layer, you don't necessarily provide intuitive analysis, you entirely rely on this example. Like we've already debunked this earlier, so I don't see why this POI is relevant to that point. But just moving on back to this entire principle, right? Understand then that a minority and a majority, if we accept then that these people buy into Western narratives, this is bad for them. Understand that the minority and the majority already have like a strong narrative against them. Chances are they probably been hate crimes in their life. Chances are they probably face some level of active discrimination in their life. This looks like I said earlier, Muslim people in the United States getting discriminated. This looks like, for example, a black person getting discriminated in Italy, for example, because of the color of his skin. If we accept the Western ideals of only Western principles being correct, this creates three manifestations of harm. Alienation, in that you do not feel a sense of sense within your community. Isolation, in that you isolate yourself from your own community, and then you actively reject, as a third layer, your own traditions. Understand then that this entrenches the right to have your unique political compass and a unique sense of beliefs. Because understand that every individual has a certain sense of belief that they not everyone is the same, but this narrative is good, it's often made by those. Understand, panel, that these people in power more often than not are. Therefore, this means that morality of things are defined, they are defined by the people in power, and this more often than not means that disenfranchised people are seen as people that are immoral. This looks like people. This is like a person said that he's immoral because he does not want to donate to charity. It's not because he doesn't want to, but because he cannot. The very fact that there is morality is being defined by people high up in society and imposed onto other people in society is one, colonialistic, but two, non-manifestable, and therefore this creates a further sense of demonization towards other people in a community. Therefore, for all these reasons, proud to propose.
Thank you. Now, please welcome the Opposition Deputy Prime Minister, Teo Chen Wen, to continue the debate for their side. Oh, pardon me. I would like to clarify that we do only accept verbal POIs as there is a problem with the chat. So if you guys want a POI, please interrupt. Thank you.
All right. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are. Please proceed.
All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So team government believes that the points, the arguments brought up by team opposition are simply preposterous. So let me begin my speech with some rebuttals. So the first speaker of this team said that it is not that. The first speaker of this team said that moral limits and standards are not original. It is a result of the influence of the political. It is the result and influence of other Western cultures or foreign countries which has governed our world and leads to these kinds of Western values and tradition. However, I would like to say that this has truly contradicted what the motion of the debate has brought up today. We mean to say that these practices, the practices in our society are the moral limits and standards for our societies, and they are not the result of neo-colonialism. It is by breaking free of these practices, these social norms, that is the neo-colonialism. And that is what we are arguing about today. So team opposition also mentioned that they disagree with our definitions of the motion. However, we would like to reiterate that our definition remains that this debate, that it is not just cultural, the cultural aspects of neo-colonialism that has influenced people, but also in terms of social, political aspects, and also educational aspects as well. So rejected. Moving on to my second rebuttal. So since team opposition brought up the issue of same-sex marriages, so let me enlighten that there are many aspects of Malaysian culture where there's Hindu temples you can see everywhere, and that the Malays also adopt 5 prayers a day, and all these are still existent. And team opposition is now suggesting that there's this kind of Western colonialism that has influenced our country. But if so, why are these practices still in existence to this very day? So moving on to my first point. So what team government is trying to propose is that there are other tools that influence societies, not the moral limits and standards which are embedded within the society. So the first point is the political structure. So after the imperialism by British or Portuguese colonialists, people have gained, after we gained independence after war, this new age of colonialism has influenced how our government has ruled the system, and how the laws and regulations are shaped. And this is the new form of colonialism in terms of the political aspects. In terms of economic aspects, there's the supply of arms and weapons, where poor countries like third world countries are reliant or dependent on rich, powerful nations to supply them with weaponry to fight other countries. So like, for example, US supplies Ukraine with weaponry because they have the power, the technology to actually be able to make these kinds of weapons. So next, there is also the fact that poor countries rely on rich countries' foreign aid and loan. So because these rich, powerful countries, they have the capacity, their economy is big and growing and fully developed, and that is why they can actually influence by giving out loans to these poorer nations. And by giving out these loans, they impose conditions such as lower trade barriers, or they force their recipients to actually set up funds for solely for buying their goods, and also in terms of high interest rates in their investments, or having some form of control in terms of infrastructure. So all these actually colonize the poorer countries, in terms of foreign aid and loan. And moving on, there's also the issue of international economic institutions, which are usually membered by all those rich nations. Like after the post-war period, there's the World Bank, IDA, which is the International Development Association, and also IFC, International Financial Corporation, which has to provide funds for those poor countries. And they are indirectly controlled by the rich nations. And so these are the forms of neo-colonialism seen in our in the economies of the world today. And besides, there's also economic dependencies, like in terms of raw materials or the limiting of exports or essential goods or sanctionings. All these are economic measures that actually tie a country to actually force a country to obey or comply to the request or agreement made by rich or poor rich countries that actually benefit them. And this is the form of neo-colonialism. There's also the creation of satellites where rich countries have rich or big countries have direct control or influence through the government or superior states. And there are many these satellites have locations in powerful near to the powerful states, and that is why it provides the kind of influence to poor countries. Yes, accepted.
If you accept this entire narrative of there being a huge economic disadvantage within rich nations and poor nations, doesn't that inherently also mean that there is a huge pressure from these big nations for smaller nations to follow the narratives of these big nations in terms of morals? If not, can you explain why this will not happen?
Okay, thank you very much for your POI. So what you have said just now was like why these big rich countries, they influence a country's nation in terms of economics, but would not influence would not indirectly influence culturally. Yes, there is this possibility, and that is why team opposition did not get the point here. We are saying that what we are adopting here, our moral limits and standards, are the norms of the society, the status quo of society. And that is why to break free, when you are trying to break free, when the Western culture are influencing this, are trying to influence these cultures, this is the form of neo-colonialism, and which is not according to the motion that we are trying to debate today. Okay, so moving on to my second point, there's also this influence of social media companies, for example, GAFA companies, which have control over technology and social media, like for example, Facebook outages, which influences businesses and the like. So all these moral limits and standards, they are out of the picture and no longer what influences and bounds our society. So that is why this new age of colonialism is evident in terms of political and economical aspects. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now, please welcome the government whip, Mir Arif, to continue the debate for their side. Is Mir Arif present?
Hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are. Please proceed.
Yeah, I'm still audible, right?
Yes.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, wait.
I'm still audible, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, panel. We think that this debate has basically devolved because side opposition has failed to understand the actual crux of the debate. Basically, what side opposition has put forward entirely is that the moral limits and standards are not the new age colonialism, but economic structures and economic power balances are. But So they put forward saying that the actual new age colonialism is such things as like satellites being built to back nearer to more powerful countries, or countries like America having economic advantages that influence like sales of arms into Ukraine and whatever. So they are saying that that is new age colonialism. We're not contending that. In fact, it can be. In fact, it probably is. But just because that is new age colonialism doesn't mean that moral limits and standards aren't, because an orange can be a fruit, but that doesn't mean that apples aren't. So yeah, it can be both. So what we are arguing here is whether these moral limits and standards are a part of new age colonialism. Why we government have mentioned that this is, and we have laid it so well with our Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. First of all, why is moral limits and standards for society new age colonialism? We have put forward exactly why, because what does these moral limits and standards look like? They look like things that limit intersectionality in cultures, such as like imposing certain milestones in life to from a set country, like usually Western countries, onto Asian countries. However, this isn't the same, because different countries have different cultures, specifically Asian countries with their collectivistic cultures versus the Western ideals of individualism. So these things don't line up. And where this becomes new age colonialism is because when imposing these things onto these countries, you are directly directly clashing with their cultures. When morality clashes with culture, that's where conflict starts. And that's what happens when you impose moral limits and standards through new age colonialism. Now, how does this look like? The government has already fully explained exactly why these things don't fit cultures by giving apt examples, and how exactly a lot of developing countries who have been colonized before, who subscribe to these things, are actually influenced by these colonialism, such as like how common law is basically, our Malaysian common law is basically enacted by the British, and how the Indonesian law system is also enacted basically by the Dutch. So there is a form of colonialism in and of itself that influences our culture. But opposition seems to think that with that, they seem to think they have a got you with their same-sex marriages. But not only does that not really add to the debate, because it's sort of a very specific example that they didn't even care to flesh out, but I have to address it because it seems to be brought up so many times, but it's even detrimental to their own point, because the whole concept of Malaysia being against same-sex marriage is actually a product of colonialism. 18, and you try to do that, but then it doesn't work out for you, it will be detrimental to your development as a person. So adhering to these things are also bad for these people in these cultures. Therefore, we have proven exactly why these moral limits and standards are harms and should be part of new age colonialism. What opposition side had to do was prove first of all, why this isn't colonialism, and second of all, prove why the harms that manifest, what harms manifest if these moral standards, what harms would manifest if these moral standards weren't enacted, and the benefits these cultures would gain from the enactment of these moral limits and standards. However, opposition has failed to do that, and that's why on the metric itself of benefits of the existence of these moral standards, we have taken the debate. The second metric that this debate weighs on is exactly the extent to which this reaches into new age colonialism, which again, opposition has failed to address, because all opposition has mentioned is that the only form of new age colonialism is economics. However, we are trying to actually tackle the point of the debate, in which moral limits and standards in and of themselves are a form of new age colonialism. Therefore, it's a wash on our side, because there's not really much matter for us to debate against when opposition fails to even acknowledge to even give us the benefit of the doubt in accepting that moral limits and standards are the point of contention in the debate between new age colonialism or not. So another point that seems to have not been addressed by the opposition is exactly the point brought up by my Deputy Prime Minister in terms of actual the social aspect of how these moral standards actively play into rich people. How it's always gonna be these moral standards are always going to play to the benefit of rich people in comparison to poor people. So now what does this look like? This looks like such an example as the American culture of tipping or donating to causes that whatever. Like, not everyone can afford this. Not everyone has the financial stability to take part within these social and moral obligations or standards. But because these standards exist and people are influenced by them so much, they'll either be ostracized for not doing it, or they will be forced to do it, but it'll be at the detriment to their own personal lives or their own financial lives or anything. In either case, these people disbenefit, either socially by being ostracized and outcast for not doing it, or if they do it, their lives are put in jeopardy because they are sacrificing so much just to fit into a moral standard that does not actually apply to them. And this specific example has not been addressed by opposition whatsoever. And so on that side, we take the debate. And in general, we feel that the government side has perfectly outlined exactly, first of all, the burden of why moral limits and standards are a form of New Age colonialism. Second of all, why these moral limits and standards of society being New Age colonialism is bad and detriment, and it's a detriment to the societies that are affected. And on those two metrics, we feel that side government takes the debate. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now, please welcome the opposition whip, Jenny Uy, to continue the debate for their side.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Starting my sorry. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. As the whip speaker today, I want to start off this speech by clarifying our case and our stance with today's motion as the opposition team. Despite this motion being rather complex and having a bit of disparity between both teams, we settle on the grounds that we are debating about whether or not social norms, moral limits, and standards are the main or effective tools in the act of influencing and dominating another state in modern day society, which is neocolonialism. And I think that side government has also agreed upon this. But I want to re-emphasize what our burden is today as opposition team and why our case is the way that it is, and why we brought up other forms of neocolonialism, but also that I want to re-emphasize that we did mention about how we did diminish the effectiveness of social norms in neocolonialism. Our burden is to prove that other aspects such as economical dependencies, economical and indirect political influence, all these other forms are the main forms of controlling a state, and that the colonizing impact of social norms are nowhere near fully influencing a state. And that I think my speakers throughout the case have provided fundamental arguments and evidence that A, first, we diminish the effectiveness of social norms in neocolonialism, and B, we've provided alternative tools and case studies that prove as more worthy as taking the form of New Age colonialism, and just serving as like a sub-argument to show that how the influence of these other tools are greater than social influence, and how this will actually contribute to neocolonialism over social influence, right? Understand that social influence really just scratches at the very surface of the domination of another state, because this is likely because the appeal of economical aspects is less personal and ultimately threatens the quality of life of a person. However, trying to alter these social beliefs that is already belonging to a country is extremely difficult, as proven by the previous speakers, due to the fact that these norms are heavily engraved in the country's history. Thus, we think that the influence of social norms is an ineffective utility as an attempt to overtake a country in modern day society. We find that it does not impact the core of a country in the aspect of influencing them. Thus, we do not think that this is counted truly as modern day colonialism in its full core, in its solid essence, right? Tying this to my perception of government's case, we think that their case is honestly based off a lot of liquid assumptions, even in their definition itself, in which was already challenged by our LO. Furthermore, they seem to assume that the biggest assumption they made is that many of these smaller countries are already heavily influenced by Western powers and losing our culture. And although that might be like hardly solely true, but in reality, much of these underdeveloped or developed countries such as Malaysia or India, for example, still strongly uphold social norms, morals, and standards, right? Perhaps government is focusing solely on a very concentrated community that is influenced by social media and content from applications like TikTok or Instagram, right? But the wide majority of our population from our public schools, for example, or those who have zero to little exposure to these applications, still follow our cultures and morals pretty heavily. I'll take it later, please. See that the largest influences leading to endangered cultures or culture death, which was pretty much what the PM speech revolved around, is caused by several other more impactful issues regarding the pandemic itself, in which we are less able to continue with usual cultural practices. And the final clarification that I want to make as whip speaker is that this metaphor that government team said that orange can be a fruit doesn't mean an apple can't. I like this metaphor, but I also want to explain in terms of this metaphor that we give you examples of how oranges and bananas can be fruits, but also how we talk about how your apples don't count in the fruit basket as well. We talk about how social norms doesn't have that great of an impact, and Western influence doesn't actually have that much of an influence on these smaller countries in terms of like colonizing and dominating that country itself in comparison to economical aspects, right? We think that it doesn't really count as a form of neocolonialism because its impact is so minuscule, and we put all these other economical aspects out, especially my DLO, to prove that what neocolonialism should actually look like, right? So moving on to my refutation, let's talk about the largest clashes and issues, threefold. First of all, the definition. PM didn't say that they aren't talking about neocolonialism, but that we are bringing light to other aspects of neocolonialism, as our goal is to prove that social norms is hardly influential enough to classify as a form of neocolonialism, right? They didn't engage with the fact that we showed how social norms within a country still retains and diminished the point instead. Yet understand that we still repeatedly emphasize this again and again is because culture still exists heavily within these countries, even in our own country, Malaysia. And again, it is based off their assumption that all these countries are already following these Western ideals, which we have substantial evidence, as my DLO has proved, that it really isn't, right? That we still retain our culture quite heavily, not just in Malaysia, but in countries within Africa and the Middle East as well. Second of all, are countries being socially influenced or not? That is one of the biggest clashes here. So government argues that our countries are, and we as opposition argue that it is not. I think to finalize this point is again to provide substantial evidence that culture and traditional ideas still heavily exist within these smaller countries. It is important to note that yes, we concede that culture is diminishing. However, it is not necessarily influenced by Western colonialism, that they fail to engage or consider with the fact that many other factors that diminish culture and social norms still exist, including how in the modern day, COVID, for example, has made it virtually impossible how the last 2 years have been fading cultural practice. However, understand social norms still exist in certain countries, whether or not they violate human rights like same-sex marriage, literally arguing that your moral limits does serve as proper influence if these immoral practices still occur in the first place. And before I move on to the last point,
if you
I want to take
the narrative that these nations do not have a heavy colonialist bias in terms of the social norms, why then is it uniquely different? These nations have an economical colonialism taking place. Can I get some clarification?
Sorry, you were lagging. Could I? Oh, sorry, I don't have time. Actually, do you want to say it really quickly? Sorry.
Yeah, basically, we accept this entire characterization that these nations do not have colonist influence towards social norms. Why then does this colonist imprint suddenly happen on the economics of things?
Colonist? I'm lagging so badly. I'll see if my reply speaker can touch on this, but my conclusion, I'm very piercing. My last point, with that same this whole point about same-sex marriage, this whole class that is just to be an example. I think that Malaysia is made out of several cultures that isn't just about the law, but religious and cultural norms itself that do not are from Western influence, right? Influences, right? We mentioned about the law, but we're still modern legalized sex marriage, but we are still socially influenced or outlook to Western ideals. Then our laws would have been greatly altered by now, similar to the way in a marriage society disagrees, then all of these laws against same-sex marriage will already be overturned, right? So it really starts in society's ideals itself. With that, I want to end my speech, and for my POI, I hope that my reply speaker can touch on it.
All right, thank you for the speech. Now that we have heard all the three speakers for both teams, there will be 3 minutes allocated for the preparation of the speech, starting now. The time of 3 minutes has ended. I shall now invite the opposition team to present their reply speech. Opposition, please.
Am I audible and visible?
Could you turn it up a bit?
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So a country is defined by its people, and its people are influenced by their ancestors in terms of cultures, manners, principles, beliefs, and social norms. And all these are long embedded into our society. Outside influence may include Western cultures, foreign, rich, powerful countries who control poor countries. So what team government has argued was that social norms and moral limits cause harm. The social norms and moral limits has been dissipated because of colonialism, and has been, and these kinds of the colonialism has caused harm following the influence towards Western cultures, which has diminished what we as the country of the people of that country has believed. However, we have given points as to how the influence of neo-colonialism in terms of social norms only scratches the surface, and how how the scale of the economical impact has truly outweighed the social influences of this practice. And besides, team government also mentioned how it influences and how neo-colonialism has influenced or diminished what the social practices or cultural norms that people in the society have today, such as religious sacrifice or Western culture, which has overtaken this culture. However, we have already proven and given arguments how other factors such as COVID-19, parents choosing not to continue with the tradition, has contributed to the fading of these cultural norms. So the points that we have given out is that foreign countries' moral limits and standards cannot easily influence another country's social norms or limits. These kinds of norms differ from place to place and are influenced by ancestors and traditions. Larger powers, they try to influence in different ways, such as through economical or political aspects instead, and these can be seen substantially in our world today. Moral limits and standards are the status quo of our society, and we are arguing that these are not the new, and trying to break free of it is the neo-colonialism and not adopting it. So what we are trying to say is that moral limits and standards are out of the picture. They are no longer they are not longer the new colonialism that we know today. It is embedded within our society. They're no longer influencing or bounds a society. They are no longer influencing or bounds people's ideas. It is people's choices to be influenced by other factors. It is the factors that contribute to these kinds of changes. So our world has changed. So once a country is colonized through wars and weapons, this new age of colonialism is evident in terms of how a country's economical and political stance is influenced by other countries, not just through social aspects. And with this, so proud to
Thank you. I now call upon the government team to make their reply speech. Government team, please.
Give me a second, yeah. I think I've just turned off the computer. Is it still on? Can you guys? I can't see the screen. Yeah.
What did you press?
I pressed here and then just turned off.
Then press there again.
Oh, you turned off the monitor.
I think so.
Just see.
You know what? I'll just use my laptop. Am I visible?
Yes, you are.
Right, cool. I have no idea what has happened there, but okay. Oh, okay. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think that in understanding which side takes the debate today, we need to identify the burdens of both sides. Gulf pushes to you, and within these burdens, there are burdens that are symmetrical, meaning they are contested on both sides, and burdens from government that go completely unchallenged. I'll explain to you why, even if we ignore these unchallenged motions, which in of themselves should be ground for why we win this debate, we still win the debate on that in which it is contested. So looking into the burdens of today's debate, let's look at ops burdens first, shall we? Ops burden is that they do accept that this entire concept of moral pressure exists in the form of neoliberalism, but they wish that there is a unique harm through economic forms of neocolonization. On Gulf side, we say to you that this moral obligation that exists because of the fact that like these entire colonial entities are imposing their moral beliefs on the people is bad. Now, before moving into the weighing of these two burdens, I just want to point to the panel. One of the huge reason why I think OP immediately loses this debate is that there are two unique tensions in their case. Understand, panel, that first and foremost, as addressed by the POI and my DLO, and as pointed out by my speaker, there is a huge contradiction in that they say first and foremost that they have issues with colonialism and that colonialism leads to economic issues within the nations, in that big nations impose themselves on the small nations. We tell you then, as Arif rightly points out, this is not something that is mutually exclusive to economics, and because they do not explain it in their case, they don't necessarily tell us why this will only happen in an economic aspect and why not to every other aspect. Why is it only economics? We never learn this at all. But also, when they say that in their case, first they accept that there is some degree of moral problems, in that there is the imposing of moral, like a certain moral right onto smaller countries. Then they back and say, no, we do not accept this characterization for government. We say that it is only economics. And this goes back and forth, creating a huge amount of tension in the case. But looking into the burdens, I think that the burden that wins Gulf this debate is the fact that we talk about how this looks like for many minorities in a society. How by having a dominant narrative about morality, you actively alienate yourself from your own moral beliefs. Panel, I think this alone goes hugely uncontested in the debate because they continue this economics push as to why it doesn't happen. But even if this entire contention as to why minorities are very badly harmed in the debate, where we allow for moral values to be that of the majority or that of Western and rich people, we tell you then that looking at the clash occurs in that can we prove whether or not this concept of colonialism through morals actually exists in a society. Panel, I think that when analyzing both sides of the case, let's look at what OP says. OP says this doesn't exist and provides examples of things like the same-sex marriage in Malaysia and how like Malaysia consumes UK media but like doesn't legalize same-sex marriage. Panel, I think my DPM already points this out to you very fairly. This can't be a debate where we just be like, aha, this exists, and then they can be like, aha, Muslims pray 5 times a day, and then we're like, oh no, but people like I subscribe to meme culture. I think this is something that's already pointed out by my DPM and my Gulf whip. I think that this is just very, very uncharitable, and this is not somewhere the debate can be contended. I think that, but even if we accept this entire thing, right, panel, let's just look at what Gulf provides. Gulf provides extensive analysis as to what it looks like for people, why people would necessarily subscribe towards these colonialistic mentalities because of things like alienation that the DPM points out, but also Kavishnu in his PM speech points out to you why, as an individual, you following it is inherently bad as well. They do not address why this is bad, and I think that this just lowers the quality of the debate in general. So, panel, given the fact that we already proved to you the main clash they want to talk about, that they mitigate the harms of morals, I think that that's the real only like thing that they can challenge against this. Other than that, it's just their method econs, and like my government has already applied why that is at best like a wash in the debate. So I think that the moment we prove to you that, we win this debate. And panel, given the fact that we prove to you a completely new harm that goes completely untouched, even in the reply speech, we win. Because of the fact that we prove to you that on the metrics they want to set the debate, we still win. So therefore, given all these layers of analysis that came out from all my speakers and this reply here, I think that this is a clear Gulf win.
Thank you for the reply speech. We have now come to the end of the debate. Adjudicators may go into their breakout rooms to deliberate. Debaters, please wait in the meeting.
All right, I think the chair adjudicator can start with the comments.
All right, thank you very much. So first off, thanks for an amazing debate from both Sunway and KYUEM. Thoroughly interesting discussion on the concept of neocolonialism. I think a topic that we probably should discuss more, especially in the debating circuit. So perhaps I'm going to give like some comment thoughts about the results of the round, why we felt that way, after which I will pass it to one members of the panel for comments on the government team, after which I'll pass it to the other member of the panel for comments on the opposition case. So having said that, moving straight to the results, we had a very pleasant discussion among the panel. We came to a unanimous decision. We felt that this debate was won by the side of the government. So congratulations to Sunway, commiseration to KYUEM. So why do we feel that the win ultimately went to the side of government in this debate? I think the central question was just whether or not moral limits is considered as new age colonialism. So I think both sides of the house agree that colonialism is the imposition of value on others. The question is just whether moral limits and standards in this debate. So the claim from the government in this round is essentially to suggest that the various aspects of Western values and influences constitute colonialism in the way that it influenced values within the developing world and changed their local context and culture in order that conflicted with their traditional religious and social norms. And this essentially was an imposition of culture, not born from like the people themselves, and therefore was something that probably was not great. This kind of looked like the imposition of Western individualistic values, presumably through like popular culture and the consumption of pop media, etc., which meant that people became more individualistic and kind of rejected collectivist Asian values that used to be the traditional norm in places like Malaysia. The response from opposition is twofold. The first thing is that they suggest that this form of imposition is not necessarily that effective, and I think a large extent of this analysis hangs on the example of same-sex marriage, it being illegal in Malaysia, even though it is legalized in the majority of the Western world. The second push from the opposition is to suggest that there are other stronger forms of neo-colonialism, and therefore moral standards did not necessarily constitute a form of neo-colonialism. I think firstly, on tackling the first push from opposition, the opposition's analysis is to suggest that because there exists a difference in the culture, it would show that the extent to which neocolonialism is coercive on local society is not that strong, but also to suggest that these differences can be maintained. The response from government is basically to push back on this singular example, to suggest that this example alone is not representative of broader cultural values that Western nations impose on people, such as those individualistic values that I don't think the opposition necessarily responds to. So to that extent, the government is able to suggest that the example of same-sex marriage is itself not necessarily reflective of the greater realities, but also to explain why this example itself is an instance where the British colonizers kind of imposed that norm on society, which kind of suggested it was also an example of neocolonialism in itself. So this push that neocolonialism was not very effective, I think falls from the opposition. The second claim from Op, therefore, as to whether there are stronger mechanisms of colonialism out there, such as economic aid, military aid, and conditional funds given towards developing nations, I think the response from government is to suggest that even if there are other stronger forms of neocolonialism, it does not disprove the fact that moral limits and cultural values imposed by Western culture is itself a form of colonialism itself. So I think this is kind of a logical fallacy that the opposition falls into, because even if there are other ways in which neocolonialism is imposed, it does not change the fact that this is also one way that it is imposed, and the burden on Op is to disprove this as a means through which neocolonialism is imposed, either to explain why it just does not work. This doesn't happen in a variety of ways, or there are other ways that local culture can protect themselves from the imposition of Western values. So for those reasons, I think the panel eventually came to the conclusion that the win goes to the side of the government. I'll now pass it to, I think it's Serafina, that has some comments on the government case.
For the government team, could you clarify your points about morality not being aligned with culture?
Does that mean like you want clarification now?
Yeah.
Okay, can you just repeat that a bit again?
Just to clarify your points about morality being not aligned with culture.
Oh, well, sometimes in certain nations, because of the stage of development that they're in, and because of their traditions and cultures, certain moral values may not, certain standards and values may not be applicable. For example,
I think the example that we gave, for example, in terms of standards of society and morals, right? So a Western society might push for the narrative that if you're 18, you need to leave the house, and then you need to get into relationships in XY manner. I think the push that came, especially in the PM's case, was that this doesn't necessarily apply to every nation, and that if you choose to stay within these narratives that come from Western narratives, you are necessarily not going to be able to benefit yourselves in a society because of the fact that your own society is not conducive towards this way of living. Meaning to say that for the individual within the society, if you follow the Western moralisms, you will not align yourself with the norms within your own society and therefore feel like a sense of alienation and like an inability to become successful within the nation almost?
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll just like pass it over to my person.
All right, hello everyone. I don't want to take too much time because I think the round after us is it has been waiting for quite a while. So regarding opposition, I really liked how there was some form of effort to engage with the government, but I think that there needs to be a better layers of elaboration regarding the facts and the examples that you've given, and don't try to stay too long on one example. For example, the point that you gave regarding same-sex marriage. Perhaps you can try to go to a different example, and then you can explain and flesh out better. So I think there was a lack of fleshing out for ideas. And also, I had quite some trouble from jumping to your point. So I didn't really see where the connection was. I didn't see how this connected with that. Where do I go now? And what does this prove? And lastly, before I end my comment, I actually want to really congratulate the second speaker from the government team, Vinishwaran, because I was for the previous round and I commented how you should improve your pacing, and you did really well this round, and that was really good. I think you improved so much in a matter of like few hours. So good job to you. Good job to everyone. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you so much to both teams, as well as to TEDx for organizing a platform like this. I think we need to have more showcase debates like this as well. Thank you so much.
All right. Now that the adjudicators' comments are over, so the debate has come to an end. Thank you to everyone involved, and you are excused from the meeting. To the audience, please stay tuned as we transition into the fourth round.
Okay, thank you everyone for the debate.
Thank you.
Okay, so hello and welcome to the TEDxYouth at KYUEM Debate Showcase 2022. My name is Munir Muhammad and I'll be your chairperson for this round. Allow me to introduce the esteemed adjudicators we have for this round. First, we'll have Aira Khairin binti Razdan Hanif, Iman Amani binti Azmi, and Marvin Woon Chan Hin. Next, I would like to introduce our timekeeper, Mustaqim bin Mubashir. The motion for today's debate is this House believes that technological advancement has already reached its saturation point and therefore is no longer beneficial for the general public. The government side will be represented from College Mara Seremban. Their Prime Minister is Ahmad Zakwan bin Noor Azhar. The Deputy Prime Minister is Muhammad Shamil Haikal bin Hamdan. And the government whip is Fatin Najwa binti Nur Firdausi. And our opposition today is from Institute Sinaran. The Prime Minister is Ryan Vu. The Deputy Prime Minister is Althea Grace Javino. And the opposition whip is Ryan Reynolds Swivel. So now that we've gone through all the introductions of everyone present today, I'd like to go through a few brief reminders of the rules we'll have. Each speech is 7 minutes long. The bell will be rung once at the first minute, indicating the start of points of information, and at the 6th minute for the end of points of information. No points of information can be presented outside of this window. The bell will be rung twice at the 7th minute, indicating the end of the speech. The reply speech should be 4 minutes long. No points of information may be offered during that reply speech. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Government Prime Minister, Ahmad Zakwan bin Noor Azhar, to the floor to open the debate.
Testing auto check, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Can you see me?
Yes.
All right, so my time starts now. Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening, fellow adjudicators, timekeepers, and members of the floor. Today, the motion is this House believes that technological advancement has already reached its saturation point and is no longer needed or beneficial for the general public. So we as the government completely agree. We agree with this motion with the rationale that the benefits of the technological advancement has reached a point where it no longer justifies the cost of innovation, both monetary and human resources. Now on to the definitions. For the definition of technological advancements is the changes in current technological and applied technology becoming more precise, powerful, efficient, and capable. So saturation point or saturated is the term is becoming too bloated or inefficient, producing little results with too great of a cost. Beneficial, we define as directly being useful in the day-to-day lives of the general population, since the technology seeks to ease humanity's burdens. Now, the proof of burden for the government is that the tech industry is not being productive or beneficial enough to cater to the cost of the entire world, both in socio-economic costs and human resources, especially the working class. Now, the opposition has to prove to us that these things, the cost of technological advancements is justified for the cost of it to the environment and the people. So now to my first point. My first point is that with all these technological advancements, the working and low citizens class will not be able to attain the full benefit due to the cost of which being high both in terms of socioeconomics and human resources. This is due to, so we hear many companies say that we innovate to change the world. I like to add to that quote. Companies will change the world for the rich and the rich only. So due to the fact that technological advancements is inherently costly and very expensive, working and lower class do not have the financial capability to afford it, like stuff like electric cars, mechanical keyboards, for example, or VR, iPad, Apple Watches, these innovations, they are being benefited only for the rich people and only the rich people. The first class, the rich class, the working class, and the lower class, the poor people would not benefit even slightly from these technological advancements. Don't believe me? See the difference between, in America, we have the Silicon Valley where people drive Teslas and Bugattis every day, and see the Bible Belt or the American South when they can't even get internet. So look at that. That unequal distribution of wealth is caused by this innovation. And these companies, usually like Apple and Microsoft, nowadays is Elon Musk's Tesla, they use labor to produce these, to innovate and make technological advancements. And these labors are usually from the working class, from the lower class. For example, for Apple, they use laborers in China. And they even use those Uyghurs that the Chinese are prosecuting as laborers. And all of them have to work in very, very hard-working conditions. Yes?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You said that it is not affordable. So what about the cheaper dupes, such as the cheaper alternatives for Apple iPhones?
As we can all see, even for the cheaper alternatives for iPhones and Apples, they're also very expensive. Tell me a common person from a B40 who has an Apple product. None. Or it's very few, or maybe they get sponsored, I don't know. So also innovation and technological advancement comes from education, and education itself is inherently very expensive nowadays. Not being public education, but higher education, where all these technological advancements come through. And the common people will not be able to participate in this, what we call innovation progress, because they do not have the financial, mental, physical, and accessible capabilities to access these things. Now, for the second point, my second point is research in technological innovation and advancement only leads to new knowledge and new stuff for the innovators and scientists, not the general public. Right now, the general public, especially especially for the working and lower class citizens, they care more of getting their lives secured. They want their lives to be to have a safe life. They need food. They need money for their children. They need to raise a family. And technological advancements, the countries invest a lot in innovation. But what does this cost? First world countries invest highly in research and innovation without catering to the fact that majority of the citizens won't even know or care about it due to the lack of accessibility of info. Because why? Because they are poor. So, for example, research in deep sea exploration, such as findings of new species of fish, it's costly. Those robots those submarines that go down, they're costly. But what would that benefit to the common people? None, of course. What about the plan of XE500 that we will discover in like 5 years in the future? My friend who is a B40 won't even care about that planet because he doesn't have internet. So what does this research would benefit the general public, especially these people? We care, the government cares about the people, and especially research in AI will cause the end of low-skilled jobs for the working class. As you can see, a statistic from Boston University said that 40%, more than 40% of people of low-skilled jobs will be obliterated and conquered by AI. So we in the government, instead of we care for the welfare of the common people, and instead of innovating for the rich. So I end my speech. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Next, we will please welcome the Opposition Prime Minister, Ryan Vu, to open the case for their side.
Chair, ever since the dawn of time, humans have always been curious creatures. It's in our name, Homo sapiens, meaning wise men. We have a hunger that can never be satisfied, which is why we are always developing new things. From the discovery of fire to the current technology advancements in traveling the deepest parts of the ocean, the outer brinks of space, and the unbreached areas of artificial intelligence. It is clear that we have not reached the peak of technological advancements. Before I continue, I would like to rebut the Prime Minister of the government's point. He said that the low working class, they cannot afford these new technology. But if you think about it, do you know anyone that does not have a smartphone? No, everyone has a smartphone these days. And it's only the newest of new technologies that are getting more expensive because they're new. And as time goes on, the cost of these technology, it decreases. And in the future, I'm sure everyone will be able to afford it. He also said that the general public, the working class, AI is overtaking their jobs. But I don't think that is true. But I think technology provides more work than it takes. An example of this is Grab Food. Because of smartphones, because of technology, we're able to order food from home, creating more job opportunities for delivery people. And he said it himself, Tesla provides labor for many people. So yeah. Okay, before we move further, let me first clarify what the motion means to us, the opposition team. Technological advancement is a further discovery of things that we have yet to learn of or to experience. It is clear that in the time frame of the existence of the universe, we have only been here for so long. We clearly don't have everything figured out yet. In fact, I doubt we will ever have everything figured out, as there is a vast number of things to explore. And we have only scratched the surface. To say that technological advancements has already reached the saturation point is to say that we should get comfortable with everything that we know now, as there is nothing left to be explored. That is blatantly false, as there is something new to be discovered every day. And each of these new discoveries set off a chain reaction of further discoveries. And this process will go on and on and on. And perhaps even when the sun goes down and the moon falls out of the orbit around the Earth, humanity will still not be done with their discoveries in unearthing the secrets of Earth. Had Earth reached the saturation point of technological advancement, you would not hear about new achievements being made. You would not hear about new issues, big or small, popping up every day. In fact, all would be quiet. All would be quiet. We would be staying stagnant, and we are certainly not at a stationary point in history right now. Even so, the technological advancements rejected. I'll answer it later. Even so, the technological advancements are definitely taking place every day. What are they for, if not to improve our lives? Every new discovery we make, every step forward in the world of technology is a testament that new things, products, concepts, our systems are being discovered every day. And these discoveries will always aid the general public. After all, why would we invest time, money, and energy into something that would not be for the greater good? Every step forward is a step that will continue to nurture mankind's place on this earth, and we will keep on moving forward for the rest of the time. One of the points I want to put on the table is technological advancements improve quality of life. It makes people happier, less stressed out. How does that benefit us, you may ask? It makes the general public more productive. Further technological advancements can help us with fabricating more cures for uncurable diseases such as HIV and cancer. It lessens the amount of pain people have to endure. A perfect example of this is COVID-19. COVID-19, it struck us out of nowhere. And how do we face it? Through technological advances. If not for technological advances, some of us wouldn't even be here anymore. Other than that, we can solve famine through agricultural advancements, produce new crops that offer more yield. As of now, 10% of people in the world are undernourished. That's 700 million people. Each day, 25,000 people, including more than 10,000 children, die from hunger and related causes. Through technology, we can solve all of these problems. Advancement in technology will benefit the general public by enabling people to live more healthier and fulfilling lives. This will guarantee them a slightly longer time to do all the things they've always wanted to do. Spend more time with the people they love, even with current research projects that we are so close to reaching the finish line of, such as how NASA has just released the clearest ever photos of space known to mankind, taken by the James Webb Space Telescope, released to the public, which has been a giant leap for us in space exploration. By releasing these photos to the public, we're embedding a love for new discoveries in them. We are letting them know that the end of learning and knowledge does not stop here for us. Sorry, what's your POI? 3, 2, 1. Sorry. To conclude, we, the opposition, firmly believe that technological advancements is far from meeting its end. In fact, we have not even reached its halfway point. None of these discoveries that we are toiling for will put the general public at the short end of the stick. If anything, it may promote social mobility, as with new advancements, new industries are able to open up, creating more career options for the general public. When the government has more to focus on and more to drive profit from, they reduce their funds sourced from other sectors such as education, which may decrease the cost of higher education, allowing more students from lower class of incomes to further their education and improve their standard of life. Thus, it is clear that the development of technology will only continue further, and it will always be for the greater good of the general public.
All right, thank you very much, Opposition Prime Minister. Next, I present the Deputy Prime Minister, Muhammad Shamil Haikal bin Hamdan, to continue the case for their side.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Salutations, fellow judges, timekeeper, and members of parliament. As the Deputy Prime Minister, I would like to rebut a few points made by the opposition leader. Opposition leader stated that everyone has a smartphone, which is a great assumption. The fact is, a lot of people around the world do not have access to smartphones. In fact, in our own country itself, 3 million Malaysians do not have access to smartphones, and another remaining of 5 million Malaysians are also having smartphones that are rather, well, we can say that are not to the state-of-the-art phones. In addition, the opposition leader stated how the AI isn't taking people's job, but we have statistics to prove that right now, jobs are being killed by AI due to automation. More than 40% of 47% of jobs will be killed in the future because of automation, because they will be replacing workers that are expensive due to higher minimum income and due to increased learning curve. In addition, the opposition leader keeps on telling this narrative about how we've just scratched the surface of knowledge, about how something new will be discovered. But ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about knowledge. We're not talking about explorations in space. We're talking about technological advances, like physical things that are helpful towards people. And what has it benefited? Let me ask the opposition. What has NASA's clear picture of space? Sorry, I'm not accepting for now. Is the picture of space affected the poor people in Sudan, the starving people due to a civil war? In addition, the opposition leader stated about how technological advancements has helped us so much. For example, when it comes to hunger, it can prevent, it can solve world hunger. But the issue is a lot of people are undernourished. And the issue is that we have more than enough food. We have food that can serve 10 billion people by a study conducted by McGill University. Our farms are already efficient. What is inefficient is due to the fact that it's corporate greed. There is a hoarding of food. There is problems when it comes to trading with people. Diplomacy is a problem. And the fact that a lot of these food are too expensive for some to even buy and purchase. That is the real issue. Not about innovation, but due to the current status quo. Now, the government will present two more arguments backing up the Prime Minister, concurring the Prime Minister's stance on this debate. Technology industry is no longer inventing groundbreaking innovation. That's my first point. For example, upcoming phones in the phone industry are getting better, but to not a degree that you would see back in 10 years ago, not in a groundbreaking sense. For example, iPhones are only seeing an improvement in CPU speed and other features, yet a model from 2 years ago are able to process sufficiently for a regular consumer compared to a product released today. For example, an iPhone 11 to an iPhone 13. In conjunction, Silicon Valley's by corporations such as Google and Facebook are no longer innovating bigger ideas anymore. Instead, what they're doing is they're focusing on profit, solely on profit, and buying new corporations to direct funding to improve already existing goods for consumerism and profit incentives. Now, this is not helping the people at all. In fact, we're seeing that all these companies are focusing on profits. That is the main goal, private companies. And why is it that we're not seeing major improvement in technology? Due to something called Moore's Law. Moore's Law is basically, and its industry experts have reached a consensus that there is a law that over time, to innovate will become harder and harder. And we use semiconductor advancements as a benchmark. And the fact is that a professor, Lysenson, said that the rate of progress on Moore's Law is that we are no longer onto the rate. We have almost unofficially ended Moore's Law due to the fact that right now technology industry is saturated. In conjunction, my second point, technology advancement has devastated the environment and societies of developing countries. This is all due to materialistic technological consumerism that is ruining our planet, which is not benefiting the public at all. To set for an example, rocket launchers from private corporations such as Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic produce 300 tons of CO2, which will remain in years in the atmosphere. And this is only one rocket launch. And this is all due to, for the rich elites, due to their own self-interest. When they said they wanted to make access greater for space, what they're doing essentially is opening a ticket for the rich to go to space. And we could have used instead $200 billion for combating climate change instead. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing the rich using the money for their own use. In addition, there are child labor and unsafe working environments in Congo for cobalt for private electric vehicles. In Taiwan, farmers are fighting over private corporations for water because private corporations are stealing the water from agriculture into their superconducting industries for, again, private luxury vehicles. We're seeing that lower classes of people are forced to work for the rich, and all they get is a few money, and they are being oppressed in these circumstances, benefiting the rich again. I want the opposition to prove to me, how does technology advancement affect the poor? How is it benefiting the poor? Because we are seeing that a lot of them are actually suffering from what we're seeing here. The status quo hasn't changed at all, and we're seeing that more people will be oppressed as time goes by. In addition, Moore's Law create more, back to the Moore's Law, is that they create more hazardous e-waste because a lot of these new advancements require heavy metals. In fact, there is water contamination when it comes to producing lead in which the international standards deemed safe in recycling is 600 to 600 times more. Private consumerism, the thing is just oversaturated and it's unnecessary. When instead of us focusing on private luxury vehicles, we could have spent the money for buses and trains, private public transportation, not when it comes to materialistic consumerism products instead. This is what we need to focus on. This is what the government is focusing on. We are here for the people. We are here listening to those people that need technology, not for the rich, but for those who are who are in need of these goods, but this is ultimately driven by corporate greed. Ladies and gentlemen, the stance is clear from the government. We are here for the people, we speak for the people, and the thing is, we are here to ensure that technology benefits the people, not the other way around. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that speech, Government Deputy Prime Minister. Now, please welcome the Opposition Deputy Prime Minister, Althea Grace Javina, to continue the debate from the opposition side.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to rebut the first speaker of the government's point. You said that most people do not have the finances to afford the technology that we have now, or poor people cannot afford this. My response is that only tells us that we have not reached peak advancement because it leaves room for improvement because everything has a chain reaction. More knowledge means that we can figure out how to improve their quality of life. Also, more innovations, the lower the prices will go as we discover more. So eventually the lower class will be able to benefit from this. For example, new releases of iPhones means that the older models will become cheaper and then more people can then afford it. I would also like to rebut the second speaker of the government. The first point was that we no longer make big improvements in technology, but small improvement is still improvement. We may not realize it because we're living in an era where technology is rapidly advancing. We were born into the golden age of technology, but it doesn't mean that the rapid improvement doesn't mean anything. And your second point was that it devastated other countries. That only means, again, that we have room for improvement. I will link this back to my second point later on, but it only means and supports our point that we have not reached our saturated peak of advancement because to advance means to improve. And so we can still gain more knowledge in order to solve these problems. Moving on to my first point, knowledge is unlimited. To quote directly from a National Geographic article from 2022, an estimated 97% of the world's water is found in the ocean, but more than 80% of the ocean has never been mapped, explored, or ever seen by humans. Ocean exploration data can help us understand changes in Earth's environment, weather and climate, and also to better understand and respond to earthquakes, tsunamis, and other natural disasters, which links back to our Prime Minister's point where it improves our quality of life. Furthermore, space-wise, it enhances our safety on Earth because satellite data can be used to predict natural disasters and to support emergency relief efforts. Moreover, we need to protect ourselves against the threat of being hit by a big asteroid. Because according to NASA, typically about once every 10,000 years, an iron asteroid the size of a football field could smash into our planet's surface and possibly cause tidal waves big enough to wipe coastal areas. If you need to be further convinced, dinosaurs and cavemen didn't have the technology to prevent their instant death from an asteroid impact, but we do now. And we can learn from our mistakes and not repeat history so we can prevent the same fate being implemented upon our race. Second one is new breakthroughs in science. As John F. Kennedy said about landing on the moon, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. He said this in the 60s. And it still applies to this day because by pushing our boundaries to explore the unknown, we can continually collect more information later on and update them as we understand them better, as well as challenge our assumptions. In the last decades, we have learned that the number of planets, stars, and galaxies in the universe is much higher than we expected. Take Pluto, for example. In 2006, IAU downgraded the status of Pluto to a dwarf planet because it didn't meet the 3 criteria the IAU uses to define a full-size planet. This means that we have updated our knowledge and applied it accordingly. And also, as mentioned by our Prime Minister, The first images from the James Webb Space Telescope on Tuesday, July 12th of 2022, produced the first full-color scientific images gathered and the official beginning of Webb's general science operations. It's the clearest photos yet, and this means that we have improved because this has never been done before. AI-wise, what we know then is not what we know now, because we are always advancing and it will always be beneficial. We've come from discovering wheels and inventing planes to discovering self-driving electric cars. And we used to communicate with each other using smoke signals, then public telephone booths, and now smartphones and laptops. Like this debate showcase, we're all far apart from one another, and yet it is so easy to communicate and to hold a virtual meeting with the tools we have been given and provided by the beauty of technological advancements. And iPhones are always coming up with new additions nonstop, proving that we have not reached our peak advancement point, because there's always new updates, new features, almost as every year, as every Apple user knows. These updates help make our lives easier and more entertaining even. For example, better cameras that result in clearer images, which are inexpensive compared to DSLRs.
POI.
And Face ID, later on, Face ID makes it easier to unlock our phones and there's even a new update where it can detect our faces even with our masks on. My second point, there are still issues to be solved and we are on the way to solving them, but we haven't reached them yet, which means there's some place to go. This links back to the points that I've mentioned before. For example, renewable energy. Although we have discovered substitutes for non-renewable energy, it is still not used widely. It only provides about 14% of the energy that the world uses, according to bioscience.com. It's still inefficient and costly, and many people do not have access to it or simply do not know about it. This is an issue because it means that we still have room for improvement. As I've said before, we can advance it more to make it more reliable and efficient, and in turn save our planet and reduce climate change. Another point is assistive technology, or AT. It is a technology that helps disabled people to live more independently. And as of today, we have such as VoiceOver for the blind and Google Talkback for the hard of hearing. And something more common that we all know is elevators for the physically disabled. But there is still a big gap in technology concerning this matter. It is still considered as a niche market, as we all know, even though AT still needs improvement because it's still hard or can be hard to navigate. Also, not all buildings have elevators, which makes it hard for the physically disabled. And companies need to be more thoughtful of disabled persons' needs. After all, as the statistics show, 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population, are disabled people. And that's a lot. I will accept your QOI now. 3, 2, 1.
POI.
All right.
All right. How does the improvement on smartphones, such as the cameras and AIs on detecting their masks, improve the lives of thousands of Venezuelans and Syrians that are in need of, better technology when, in fact, these are not even going to them at all?
That's another point. I'm talking about the people who do have iPhones, and I do realize that sounds insensitive, but what I mean is that the people who own iPhones, and even though that doesn't really improve on the war, that's for other technological advancements. Let's move on to my conclusion. It is still a natural human need to want to know more. Humans cannot stay still or idle, no matter how much we try to deny it, because it's a matter of fact. At our very root, we are curious beings that have a desire to be aware of our surroundings. It will always be beneficial. As Maslow's hierarchy of needs prove, self-actualization is at the very top of the pyramid. By fulfilling our need to know more, we are able to reach our full potential. As his study also proves, self-actualization is never final, further supporting our point that knowledge is unlimited, and the rapid advancements will always leave room for improvement, as there will always be problems for us to solve, because every pros has its cons. That's all for me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that speech, Opposition Deputy Prime Minister. Now, please welcome the Government Whip, Fatin Nadra binti Nur Firdausi, to continue the debate for the government side.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Okay. Greetings to members of the floor and the honorable judges. So what we see in today's debate, especially what was brought up by the side government, is that they have been constantly telling us how technology is so beneficial for us, especially in terms that it helps people in their daily lives. But let me bring you back to the core root of the problem in today's debate, which is that we are focusing in our main stakeholders, that is the general public. I'm trying to bring you back to what we are fighting for and why do we believe that technological advancement is beneficial or not when it comes to the benefit that is received by the general public and not just by the selected few. So let's recap on what the government has and what the side opposition had told us so far. So they kept going on the idea that through technology, we are able to explore the boundaries, we are able to explore the unknown, we are able to further improve our knowledge and expand our knowledge. But I ask you, how beneficial is that knowledge to our society today? How does the knowledge regarding the moon or how does the knowledge regarding how clear is the universe could help feed the poor? How does it change human life to be better in the future? So now, okay, number two, they also mentioned regarding technological improvements when it comes to iPhones. And we have mentioned time and time again how not everyone have iPhones. That is a major issue because what we're talking about, what we're catering for, what we're trying to cater for is for the general public. It's for the people who need help. So what we inside government believes is that technological advancement has already reached a saturation point and is no longer beneficial for the general public. What we mean by this is that, okay, sure, if we go back to 10 years, 20 years before, technology advancement is actually significant, especially in making human lives better. But we're looking at the year 2022, where we have almost everything that could help us lead a comfortable and healthy and safe life. So we cannot compare the technology that we have today compared to the technology that we had last time. During those times, technological advancement is a need because we didn't have that much comfort, and also we were struggling in our daily lives. But in today's advancement, we already have enough. We already have enough to live. Yeah.
You said that. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, never mind. Moving on. Okay. Moving on to what my Prime Minister has stated is that through technology, because in the year 2022, technology has already reached its peak. We already have almost everything to lead a healthy life, to lead a safe life for everyone. So we think it is unnecessary for us to keep pushing for technological advancement when we already have everything that we need. We believe that further advancement would only be unnecessary and would only benefit the rich more than the general public. Yes, what was your question?
You said that we had everything we need for technological improvements in 2022. Then what would you say about our COVID vaccines? Is that not a technological improvement?
Okay, to answer that question, it is not actually a technological advancement because we already have the sufficient technology to produce those vaccines. What we were lacking were in research. What we were lacking were in proper discussion, in proper research in those kinds of fields. But the technology, we already have it. Did we create a new technology to create the COVID-19 vaccine? No, we only needed new ideas and new methods to create those. So we believe that doesn't lie in technological advancement, but more to research. So now let me rephrase what my Prime Minister stated is that when it comes to technology advancement during this time, it only does more harm than good because number one, the advancement that we're having right now is rather stagnant. we do have advancements, but it's the difference between what we already have is very limited and it's very small, and therefore the cost that we use to achieve those limited advancement is not worth it. In our opinion, we believe that those funds that are used for technological advancement could instead be channeled to these people, to the general public, in ways that we could actually help solve world hunger, in which we could actually make a change in their livelihoods. Now, moving on. Other than that, we also believe, we inside government believe that by advancing technology, we are only benefiting the rich more than the poor. Why are we saying this? Is because newer technologies, as we know it, are very expensive, and only the rich can afford to have access to these technologies, while the poor remains poor. So let's imagine if we have technology to fly to the moon and potentially save the. Okay, let's look at the current situation. Due to this technological advancement, it's going to cause harm in the earth. So when the earth is destroyed, most people will say, if we have advancement, we can run to another planet. But this only applies to rich people. What happens to the poor? By the end of the day, the poor isn't catered to. By the end of the day, the general public isn't catered to, and side opposition is fighting for a world where they provide the comfort and the luxury for the elite few. With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now we will welcome the opposition whip, Ryan Reynolds Suibol, to continue the debate for the opposition side as a reply.
Oh. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, but you're upside down.
Yes, it's been like that since this morning. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. All
right, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stretch that the government has only been obsessed with the fact that the general public refers to people that are in low-cost groups, such as those in the B40s and those that does not have accessibility to this new technological advancements. Ladies and gentlemen, let us step back and look at the different perspective and redefine what's the general public. So the general public could be anyone, ranging from the poor and also for those who have special needs, such as those who have impaired vision and impaired those who are deaf. Okay, so if we look through this perspective, to the eyes of these people who need help in their impairments, these technological advancements, they certainly could help them make their life more comfortable and help them do more things that they will never imagine they could do if they were to stay blind or deaf. Okay. So another thing is, the Deputy Prime Minister did say that 3 million people in Malaysia do not possess smartphone. But where is the proof to back this up? Which article is this fact from? And then the Deputy Prime Minister also said that 47% of jobs will be taken in the future. But this is just a rough assumption and it's a prediction of statistics. Next is space exploration. The government are really opposed to space exploration, stating that rockets to the moon will provide a lot of emissions and could harm the environment. However, in space exploration and through modern technology, I think that emissions is a small price to pay to protect us from what's about to come from the universe outside of our Earth. For instance, my opposition leader did say that if the moon were to crash on Earth, the humans will not be done for, as long as technological advancements has been advanced and advanced and advanced into one of the most prestige stages. So we could combat what is about to happen. For example, the moon crashing, we could predict this, we could provide countermeasures to combat this, and we will not face any other problems like extinction. Okay. The government did say that poor people could not access technological advancements such as the latest iPhone, but I don't think this is necessary. Technological advancement, I think it is, it should be shown, you could choose to obtain it or not. If you want to obtain it, I think it is better if you get it from somewhere that provide technological advancement that is a few years old, so that it is more cheaper but still packs the same amount of power as the new technological advancements rejected for now. As the Deputy Prime Minister did say that past technology and current technology, for example, the iPhones, are almost the same in CPU power. That's why I would like to stretch that the older iPhones are slightly cheaper or more cheaper in other cases if you know how to find places to buy it from, for example, like secondhand shops. Then this is a huge buy for those who are not able to originally obtain the iPhones in their normal prices. Okay. What was your POI?
So you said that the phones that from the past is already sufficient enough, right? So why is it that we still need improvements such as in the smartphone industry where they have to spend millions for R&D when they don't have to do it anymore? They can use the money for fixing other things like solving world hunger instead of using the money. So may you clarify?
All right, sure. So advancement in let's go to the topic about the phones. Why they spend a lot of money in R&D to enhance the CPU in the semiconductor industry, right? So the CPU is basically a computer, right? What happens if the computer becomes more advanced and advanced and is able to calculate difficult and very complicated, complex things that even the human minds can't come up with? What if current CPUs aren't able to handle complex equations in the future that knowledge is able to break through? These equations that will be discovered in the future needs a more intelligent, efficient, and powerful CPU. That's why R&D in CPU is undergone, and this R&D is also benefited in the electronic industry for smartphones. They're just using the R&D that current developers are using so that they can implement it in their products and sell it to consumers. However, the main point of the CPU R&D is to create more powerful CPUs to use in higher specs computers. Okay, now I would like to strengthen the points of my opposition team. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the status quo shows that technology is constantly improving day by day and day. It is a fact that humans love innovation, and innovation has brought us so far that because of technological advancement, the first point of the Prime Minister is a more comfortable lifestyle. Okay, so our life expectancy will increase in that case. This fact is backed up by the studies done by the United Nations, where the individuals aged 65 or 65 outnumber the children aged 5 and below. Why is this? Okay, so now I'll provide another statistical analytics. In fact, according to the United Nations Department of Economics and Social Affairs Population Division, year 2019, the percentage change in individuals aged 65 or above will increase by 120% from 2019 to 2050. That's a 20% increase, and we're looking at the number double since 2019 in year 2050. For example, the stats shows it's 700 million people. that are age 65 and above in 2019. So in 2050, it'll be around more than 140, more than 1,400 million. Why? Because factors of early detection of diseases, exercising equipments that help maintain health. Okay, let's look at Japan. Japan has an 84.36 highest life expectancy in the world. Why is this? Because there's regular health checks, and through their advanced technology, they are able to prevent diseases such as tumors and other life-threatening diseases. Okay, now my second point, knowledge is unlimited. I'd like to strengthen this too. People venture deeper into the unknown. There are more things to be figured out. Okay, for example, quarks in 1964, according to the timeline, if we compare it to the timeline, is really recent. Okay, why we learn new knowledge? We are able to understand certain phenomena more clearly, and we are able to implement this new technology into current tech and make it better. Okay, there is a cycle. We, the opposition, believe newfound knowledge would one day be normal knowledge after continuous implementations in technology. Okay. If people before do not believe that knowledge is unlimited, clearly we will not be able to have this debate today. Okay. Third point, there are more problems to be solved. Okay, a simple example. I'll give you an analogy. The app on your phone is constantly being updated. Why? Because there are things called bugs, and bugs are problems in the app. Developers updates giving you and improve features that help improve the consumer's efficiency in daily tasks. Okay, we are all guilty of this. We ask the what ifs. What if affordable cars could be used on a wide scale without emissions? What if matter like aluminum, plastic could be duplicated so that we won't lose shortage of any more raw materials? This is the kind of world that the opposition side envisions and hope to achieve. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Opposition Whip. Now that we have heard all the three speakers from both teams, there will be 3 minutes allocated for the preparation of the reply speech, starting now. All right, seeing as the time for preparation has now elapsed, I shall now invite Ryan Vu from the opposition to provide the opposition's reply and make their speech.
We, the opposition, have clearly proved technological advancements has so much more room to grow and will continue to be beneficial for the general public. The government has tried to point out that the working and financial class will not have the ability to afford these new advancements. But this only acknowledges that we haven't reached the peak of technology, where one of its criteria is mass distribution. Until we see this happen, we will know that technology will keep on rapidly growing. They have also stated that AI will destroy jobs, but wouldn't it just create more job opportunities in a newer, fresher sector? Just like we have ditched candlesticks for filament bulbs, we can gracefully introduce new sectors in the economy while wiping out old ones that will allow more people to venture new horizons that align with the world's current state. As for the hoarding of food, if there were a surplus of food, surely this would promote the quicker distribution of food to prevent wastage. And this would surely contribute to solving world hunger. Also, it may appear that we keep on seeing on the same innovations only because we only focus on the same sectors. If the government were to expand their arguments to other sectors such as sea and space exploration, they would not be able to deny that we still have a long way to go. And innovation will only see an exponential increase. As we can see, these quickly increasing technology will produce a large benefit for the general public. The world we see ourselves in, the world we, the opposition, see ourselves in, is a world where there is no famine, there is peace. We see ourselves with everyone having advanced technology. We see ourselves happy, we see ourselves fulfilled. And to emphasize on our points, knowledge is never ending. It is infinite. There will always be more things to learn. The weaknesses and disadvantages that have rooted from this only means that we can learn from this and find the solutions to these problems. That also means that since there are still issues to be solved, we are on the way to solving them. So it means that we still have a journey for advancement. And that proves my case.
All right. Thank you, Opposition Prime Minister. I now call upon the government's Deputy Prime Minister to speak and present their reply speech.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you. Salutations, Mr. Speaker and members of Parliament. Today, we are in much of a crisis when it comes to the needs of our people. Today's motion is about the benefiting of the many, of the people that are in need of help from the government. The world that is presented by the government is simple. We do believe in the benefits of technology. We are not reverting back to the Stone Age. However, we acknowledge that we have enough technology to help people from other regions. We do not need to make new technologies, but we need to distribute the technology. We need to get it from the rich into the right hands. We need resources, diverting these resources from unnecessary innovation into helping the poor, the others that are in need of these resources. We don't need improvements in smartphones. We do not need improvements in materialistic goods. We do need resources to reduce world hunger. combat corruption, protect the environment with pre-existing technology, because it is sufficient. Because the thing is, we are covering more than just the rich. We are covering everyone, the holistic pie of the world population. Millions will be covered. However, when we present the opposition world, they're stating about how they want to maintain the continuation of the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, are you happy with the status quo? Are you happy with what's happening when you see the developed world is innovating so much, but the third world countries are getting so little? Technologies and advancements is happening, and smartphones are getting upgraded. But how does that help? How does that benefit those who are in need of help? Those who are fleeing from countries with war, who are trying to survive with despite the malnutrition conditions they are in. Self-existing cars are not going to help these children, the Sudanese children in civil war, in Venezuela, in Syria, in Palestine, in the Kurdish regions, in Afghanistan. Space photos are not going to also help them either. We need to think realistically, because to be frank, a lot of these innovations and advancements are only helping a very small group of people. The opposition here is definitely encouraging what we say a parallel debate. They are not attacking the real problems that we have here. The environmental side effects, what is happening to these people that are working in multinational companies for the sake of development, is merely a continuation of the status quo. We want to help the people from the government side. We want to benefit the majority of the people. 689 million people are living in extreme poverty. 800 million people are malnutritioned. 4.2 billion people are the lower classes of this world, and they represent the majority of the people by the Brookings Institution research. Now, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, what kind of world would you, your friends, your family would want to live in? The government side, where we will ensure the distribution of technology to everyone that requires it, or the continuation of the status quo that is presented by the opposition? It is clear where the answer lies in. That's why the government stance of today's motion is strong, because we are here to help the people. We are here to ensure that no one is left behind. Our policy is clear. No one is left behind when it comes to the modern society. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Government Deputy Prime Minister, for your reply speech. And thank you to all the speakers for their participation in this session. As we have now come to the end of this debate, adjudicators may go to their breakout rooms to deliberate. Debaters, please wait in this meeting until further notice. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for all your patience. And I would now like to welcome back our adjudicators to give their oral adjudication.
Hi, so is everyone here? Can we start?
Yes, we are here. Yes.
Okay, then. All right, so I will first state who won, who the three of us thought won this debate, and we'll then give you guys some like feedback on the points that you made and maybe some feedback on how well you spoke. All right. So for today's debate, we believe that side government deserves to win, and the reason why we believe that side government deserves to win is because we believe that government had they had fought for something that was more important. Like they put more emphasis on the fact that what they're fighting for and their stance is to protect the general public, because that's the main stakeholders of today's debate. All right, so I like among the clashes that were in today's debate was companies will not clashes. Among the points that side government had brought up was how companies will change the world for the rich and rich only, how technological advancement will only benefit the rich people, and it's very expensive for the poor to be a part of. How research and technological advancement only leads to new stuff for the scientists and inventors, and how AI is taking over your jobs. Side opposition brought up points of how technological advancement can continue to improve quality of life, because there are so many issues in this world today that needs to be solved, and we can solve them through technological advancement. How technological advancement does not destroy careers, but instead creates more career options for people. How we could even use technological advancement to improve education for children and our future generations, although that was a point that wasn't really strong because it was brought up really, really late in one of the speaker's speech. And how eventually everyone will be able to afford technological advancement, all right? So the first issue I had was in side government's strongest point, which was why side opposition never proved and rebutted to government on what kind of incentive rich people and companies will have to not use the new technological advancement for their own interests. Because you can already see in this world today that although there are so many people struggling, there are so many other rich people who are using these technological advancements for things that are completely useless, such as, for example, we heard about how Elon Musk had decided to venture into space, and how people are trying to look for different ways in space that we can, in order for us to survive. Side opposition never proved to us why all of a sudden these rich people and rich companies will take all of their funds and not what incentive they'll have to use it to improve the lives of the general public. They never proved that to us. Second of all, side opposition talked about how the price of the technology will decrease, and sooner or later people will be able to afford it. But we have to think about how long this is actually really going to take, because even though, like example, iPhone 12 came out in today costing like 3,000, in 5 years it's probably going to be lowered down to like 2,000 or 1,000, which is still a large amount of money to afford. And especially with issues that continue to pop up in our world today, such as the pandemic, where so many people lost their jobs, or such as the Ukraine and Russia war, where it caused us to have a high spike in the price of wheat. People are already struggling to put food on the table. It's very difficult, and the disparity, the gap between the richer people and the poorer people is widening because of these current issues, and we're not able to determine how long until price of tech will decrease. Second of all, about how side opposition said how we can use these resources to improve our education of the future generation, but we have to see how, although the poor will be eventually have access to education because of technology, because of all these online resources, the rich people also have the equal opportunity to access these resources, and henceforth they'll just continue to become smarter, and the poor who still has to continue to face the problems of having Wi-Fi problems and internet connectivity issues and less people really caring about them is going to be the reason there's a larger gap between the rich and the poor. And this is evident from when the global pandemic COVID-19 happened, which caused large disparity in how many students were able to have access to resources in order to complete their SPM studies. Other than that, I believe that it was a pretty good debate and there was pretty good engagement from both sides. I just feel that opposition had a pretty was a little too optimistic in thinking about how, in making it seem as though advancement in technology is really going to benefit the general public in the future, when on the same under the same breath they also say that they're going to use this technology for things that don't really matter, for materialistic gains like advancement in smartphones or having a trip to space. So that's why I believe that side opposition didn't really respond to government's points that much, and therefore I feel like government still had a slight win over side opposition. Yeah, and that's all. I think that's all I have. If anyone wants to contact me, then you guys can just contact me on WhatsApp or on my Instagram, Ira Kyrene. And now I'll pass the feedback on to the rest of the adjudicators.
I think Ira has fully summarized well the entirety of the debate. I just want to pinpoint on the arguments that I thought was really strong for government and opposition. So the first argument for government that I thought was the strongest for them that they brought until the end of the debate was that tech advancement has devastated poorer countries. I really like the way that you guys give examples such as rocket launches will produce a lot of trash in space, and then opening a ticket for the rich to explore space. That was really good because even though opposition didn't find such of a strong rebut, that argument was brought up until the end of the debate. So that was for Gov. Secondly, for opposition, your strongest argument for me was that knowledge is important. I like how you went on and on about how there's not a time in our world where knowledge isn't important. We always have to work to improve. Like, for instance, we can limit our time to responding to tsunamis. You gave that example. Space-wise, we can enhance the safeties of our life when it comes to like meteoroids hitting Earth. So I thought that was a really strong argument from opposition. But in total, just like Ira has just said, is that I don't think opposition rebutted some of Gov's arguments well enough to the point that some of the arguments still stood until the end of the debate. So that's all from me. Thank you.
All right. So I just wanted to talk about what could have been done better. So I think I agree with what the previous adjudicator said. It was about engagement because there are many points that stood that were answered but were given like half answers, so the points weren't really taken down, so it stood until the end of the debate. And just speaking about what could be improved here is like, I think in SideGov the stakeholders should have been more clearer and more well defined and explained, because in the end it didn't really help you as much. And then if I was talking about side opposition, the ideas you given were good, but how optimistic you were in this debate was a bit not helping you, because when we were thinking about all the points and looking it over, it is not really addressing the core issues that we have now at the present time, because by looking ahead so much, we are not really addressing the issues now, because how are we to tell that the issues won't get worse if we just keep looking ahead and not right now that's happening in this world? So I think, just to sum up again, it's about engagement and giving more practical addresses to this debate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that feedback, adjudicators. And thank you and congratulations to all the participants of this debate as well. From our team, I would just like to sincerely thank all the debaters, adjudicators, the timekeepers, and audience members for participating in today's rounds of this TEDxYouth at KYUEM 2022 Debate Showcase. Please tune in to our final rounds that will take place tomorrow morning, touching on the themes of abundance and scarcity and hope. See you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you. Congrats, guys.
Thank you. Congrats.
Congrats.